Hello Internet! Tonight I'm going to show you how to make chocolate pie from scratch. First thing we have to do is make our pie crust. We're going to use a bowl, all-purpose flour, salt, butter that's been freezed or cooling in the freezer I should say, and ice water. Let's get into it. First thing I'm going to need is a cup, one cup, and 1/4 cup of flour. Remember, this is all-purpose flour. It won't come out if you use other flour, it's just not the right flour for it. And then we use a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, okay. Just mix that up quickly so the salt gets all mixed into the flour. Then I'm going to use 3/4 of a stick of butter, which is equal to 6 tablespoons. Now these are all been chopped up into little small pieces, and like I said, they've been sitting in the freezer because they need to be nice and cold. Now you're just going to take, and unfortunately it's going to take a while, you just got to work it in. I'm going to just get in there and use my hands. Heck with the forks. Now this butter is unsalted because we added salted to the flour itself. I've never tried it with salted butter, so I wouldn't recommend it because I don't know how it comes out, but you could try it and just omit some of the salt from the the part we put in the beginning. Now what we're doing is we're just breaking up the butter and rubbing the flour into it. Like I said, this takes a while to do. I'm going to switch hands, my arm's getting sore. Now as we do this, you're going to notice that it's going to start becoming like a crumbly mixture. That's what you want. You don't want it all incorporated, and it's not supposed to look like a cake. It's not our brownies. Like, it's supposed to have a crumbly consistency to it. Because you want little pieces of butter to melt into the pie when you're cooking it in the oven. And I did forget to mention that my oven is preheating right now. You don't have to preheat it right at the beginning, because after we're done mixing this together, it sits in the refrigerator for approximately 30 minutes to an hour. No less than 30. Almost there. Okay. At this point, we've got a lot of the butter mixed in. So what we're going to do now is I've had some water cooling in the freezer as well, because it calls for ice cold water. I don't have ice to put in it, so I just cooled it in the freezer. It's 1/4 cup of water. You're going to add it little bits at a time. And then work it around inside the dough. And yes, it's extremely sticky, and it will be, but as you can see, it's starting to come together. Just got to keep working with it. trying to do is get it into somewhat of a ball, and then we're going to take it out of the bowl. That should be good. Bowl aside. Okay. And as you can see, it's still kind of sticky to my hands. So what I'm going to do is sprinkle a little bit of flour on it. And work it together. Don't want to lose all my good pieces. Okay, and that's what I'm going to do. Then all I need now is a piece of plastic wrap, saran wrap. Put it in the center. And that's it. That's our pie crust. We're going to put it in the fridge for 30 minutes, up to an hour, no less than 30, so it'll have a chance to harden up. And then we'll take it out and roll it for our dimensions of our pie pan. We'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, it's been 30 minutes now. My dough is all set up. I have dusting of flour on my chopping board. Now what I'm going to do is unwrap this. Okay. And then I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of flour on the top so it doesn't stick to my rolling pin. And then you just roll it out. And if it starts sticking to your rolling pin, you can just put a little more flour on top of it. See how it's starting to stick to my rolling pin? There we go. A little more flour. Like I said, I don't want it sticking to the rolling pin because I don't want, when I go to roll it out, it can't stick to it because it'll rip the dough and then you're stuck patching a hole in the dough. And we don't want that because then our pie filling will fall out. I might run out of chopping board space. I just flicked a piece across the floor. See how it is moving? Yeah, so I thought it was starting to stick to my chopping board. A little bit of flour. Reposition it so I can. Now I know it looks huge, but you have to be able to get it up the sides of the pie pan. So you're not just making a 9-inch circle for a pie pan, you have to come up the sides as well. And then if you want, you can make your fancy little crimps on the ends of it. Just a tiny bit more. And it doesn't have to be perfectly circular. You're going to cut the ends off anyway. A little bit of flour before I put it on. Okay. And you start at the end. And you should be able to just roll it out over your pie. Fix it to where you want it. You can pinch it up a little bit higher if you have to in some spots. I leave some of the excess on it because I really like the ends of the pie crust. If you want to make it fancier and cut it all the way around and crimp it properly, go ahead. I'm probably going to take this part off because it's a little too much. Grab myself a knife. Now, if I was cooking for a family and bringing this to a dinner, then I would probably make sure it's all neat and all the crimps were, you know, perfect all the way around. But since it's just our little family eating it, it's not a big deal. Besides, it's homemade. It's supposed to look rustic. Okay, now what we're gonna do, some people put pie weights in them. I don't have pie weights. You can put aluminum foil with sugar in it to weigh it down if you want, if you don't want bubbles in it. I personally don't care. It doesn't matter to us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place it into the oven for 25 to 30 minutes or until the crust turns golden brown. I may check it here in about 15 minutes to make sure the crust on the top isn't burning. If it is, I will put a strip of aluminum foil around it, and if I do, I'll show you that. And I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. Do not put holes in it though, because we're putting pie filling in here and it will seep underneath your pie. Okay, we'll be back in about 25 minutes. Okay, so we're back. The pie crust cooked for about 30 minutes. As you can see, it started turning golden brown on the outside and it pulled away from the edges just a little bit, so that to me tells me that it's done. It's not burnt on the bottom, sorry if you can't see that. And I let it cool, so it's been on there for a little while. I had other things to do, so I just let it cool. And now what we're going to do is make the filling. Filling is actually really simple. So what you're going to need is a box of Jello pudding, the cook and serve type. I personally don't like instant puddings. They just have a nasty cardboard taste to me, so I always use cook and serve. Now, this is the 5-ounce box, so you either need one 5-ounce box or two of the smaller boxes. I think they're like 3.75 in it, something like that, but you end up having excess from the two small boxes. So what we're going to do is cook it to the directions that are on the side for the pudding. What it calls for is 3 cups of milk. This is 2% milk. I would imagine that whole milk would probably work the best, but I don't like whole milk. I usually drink skim milk, so jumping from skim milk to whole milk is quite a difference. But the only reason I use 2% is because when the pie sits after, if you use skim or 1% milk, it separates, so your pie becomes a little bit slimier, and obviously it looks gross and it doesn't taste as well. Okay, so I don't have my heat on yet, so what I'm going to do is mix this in. I'm going to turn my handle so I can hold it with my less dominant hand. I try to mix it together a little bit before I start cooking. just so that when it does start to warm up, it doesn't get clumpy and stick to the bottom. And if you never cook and serve pudding, just start out slow. Don't go past medium heat, and don't get scared, because the bottom of the pudding always sticks to the pan slightly. It's inevitable. It's gonna happen. So basically all we do is we sit here, we wait for it to warm up, and we whisk. Once it starts warming up, starts boiling, bubbling a little bit, you whisk all the time. You just constantly whisk. But right now it's still cold, so I will come back to you when it starts bubbling. Okay, we're back. So I noticed that they're starting to get a lot of heat coming off my pan, so I'm going to start stirring it. And I can feel that the bottom has like a silkier texture to it, so that means that it's starting to stick to the bottom a little bit, so I want to make sure I keep it stirring here. It's going to seem like it takes forever to start, but once it starts, it cooks really quick. And we just keep stirring for a while. I know there are devices that you can actually buy that sit on the side of your pan that like just stirs your stuff constantly without you even being there, but I don't exactly trust that they wouldn't flop it all over. I'll be back with you in a few minutes once it starts to thicken up. Okay, so as you can see, when I pull the whisk through it, it doesn't move very much. It's getting thicker. Not quite where we want it yet, so we're just gonna keep stirring it. At this point is when you really want to make sure you are constantly stirring it, because it's going to get thick. It's going to have a tendency to stick to the bottom even more. The overall consistency that we're looking for is like, I want to say a gravy, like a thicker gravy, not a thin out of the can type of gravy, a homemade gravy that has that nice richness to it. Because it's going to look thin when you pour it out, but it's essentially going to set up and make pudding. And just keep stirring. My arm is falling asleep. You can tell I'm not left-handed. Like a baby giraffe being born. Starting to thicken up on the sides of the pan. You can see when it's bubbling, how it's like little volcanoes erupting. It's almost ready. And you can see when I did that, it went from a dark layer on the top. I'll let it do it again. And then I just go through it, see how it's light underneath? Almost almost there. Maybe about 1 more minute and that'll be about it. It's kind of like watching paint dry. Slow. See how it's coating my spatula and still sticking there on the end? I would say that is done. Okay, I'm gonna shut off my stove before it pops on me. Alright. Now I'm just gonna take it and pour it into my pie crust. Let me get a spatula so I can... Now, when you're scooping this out, you can notice that I said it would stick on the bottom. This one didn't stick too bad because it's a very thick bottom pan. I don't tend to scrape the bottom of the pan because for some reason it just has more of a bitter taste because it's been there on the bottom. Sorry, I'm blocking your view, but I have to use my right hand to get out the sides. See? That's all I do. And then I'll give it a little shake so it'll level out. I usually let it sit on the counter for 5 minutes or so it's not scalding hot, and then you can just put, if you have a cover for it, if you don't, I usually just put a piece of aluminum foil on it because I don't like putting saran wrap on things that are hot. And you place it in the fridge and it's good to go. You can eat it that night, you can eat it the next day, or I wouldn't keep it in your fridge past 3 to 4 days because I would say, because it has a milk in it, I wouldn't eat it past 3 to 4 days later. But that's it. Homemade chocolate pie. Thank you.